The star died screaming. Commander Zethko watched through the bridge viewport as the ancient sun collapsed into itself. The weapon that killed it had been fired 3 days ago from a distance of 12 light-years. Now the star's death throw sent waves of radiation across the entire solar system. Cooking planets that had once held billions of lives. This was just Tuesday in the war zone. Zethko belonged to the Kethmori, beings of living crystal who had mastered the fundamental forces of energy. His body sparkled with internal light, each facet of his crystalline form able to channel power that could level mountains. His people had evolved beyond flesh millions of years ago, becoming pure energy housed in perfect, geometric shells. The enemy they faced was equally terrible. The Vashtai had taken a different path. Where the Kethmori became energy, the Vashtai became masters of matter itself. They could reshape atoms with a thought, turning space dust into battle fleets or transforming entire moons into weapons. Their ships looked like living things because they were living things, biomechanical horrors that could heal from any damage and adapt to any threat. Both races had been fighting for 800,000 years. The war had started over philosophy. The Kethmori believed that energy was the true foundation of reality, that matter was just energy slowed down, trapped in crude forms. The Vashtai argued the opposite, that matter was real and energy was just matter in motion. It seemed like a silly thing to fight about. But when two godlike races disagree about the nature of existence itself, silly arguments become cosmic disasters. Now, 800 millennia later, no one remembered who fired the first shot. Both sides had evolved far beyond their original forms. The Kethmori had become beings of pure thought and energy. The Vashtai had merged so completely with their technology that they were no longer sure where their bodies ended, and their machines began. What everyone remembered was the killing. Zethko's flagship, the Eternal Radiance, drifted through a graveyard of worlds. Broken planets tumbled through space, their surfaces still glowing from weapons that had struck them centuries ago. Massive structures floated in the void, the remains of generation ships, battle stations, and mobile cities. Some were so large they had their own gravity fields, pulling in debris in smaller wrecks like mechanical vultures. The scale of destruction was beyond imagination. Entire solar systems had been turned into weapons. Stars had been moved from their natural positions to create massive laser arrays. Black holes had been tamed and used as ammunition. Both sides had built structures that spanned light years, only to see them reduced to cosmic dust. "Status report," Zethko commanded. His voice resonated through the crystal matrix that served as his ship's communication system. "The Vashtai fleet is holding position around the Nexus," reported Sub-Commander Euthra. Her crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy. "They have deployed their standard Helix Prime formation. Bio-dreadnoughts in the outer ring, support vessels in the middle, and their flagship in the center." Zethko felt a familiar wave of frustration. Of course they had deployed Helix Prime. It was what they always did when defending a major installation. Just as his own forces would respond with Formation Delta 7 energy projectors in a spherical array, with focused beam ships providing cover fire. They had fought the same battle 1,000 times before. The Nexus was worth fighting for, at least in theory. It was a massive space station, larger than most moons, that had been built by some forgotten race millions of years before either the Kethmori or Vashtai had reached the stars. Its purpose was lost to time, but its construction was perfect. Walls that could withstand any weapon, power sources that never failed, and defensive systems that still functioned after eons of abandonment. Both sides wanted it. Neither could take it. So they fought over it, year after year, century after century. The station itself remained untouched, while fleets died around it like moths around a flame. "Sir," Euthra continued, We are detecting movement from the younger races. A Galactic Council delegation is approaching the system. Zethko's form brightened with annoyance. The Galactic Council was an alliance of primitive species that had somehow managed not to destroy themselves. They periodically sent diplomats to try to end the ancient war, as they called it. These attempts were always failures. How could beings, who had only been spacefaring for a few thousand years, possibly understand a conflict that had raged for almost 1,000,000 times longer than their entire history? They talked about peace and compromise, as if such concepts had any meaning when applied to fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. "Shall we destroy them, sir?" asked Yithra. "No," Zethko replied. "Let them watch. Perhaps seeing the true scope of our conflict will finally convince them to stop wasting our time with their naive proposals." The truth was that neither the Keth Mori nor the Vashtai could afford to ignore the council entirely. The younger races bred fast and spread quickly. Left unchecked, they might someday become a threat. Better to let them exhaust themselves on pointless diplomacy than to unite them against a common enemy. Besides, destroying the council ships would be seen as an act of aggression by the Vashtai, who would assume the Keth Mori were trying to gain some tactical advantage. Better to let the primitives live and maintain the delicate balance of power. On the viewscreen, the Vashtai bio-dreadnoughts began to move. Their organic hulls rippled and shifted as internal organs rearranged themselves for combat. Weapon pods sprouted from their surfaces like tumors, each one capable of destroying a city. The ships looked like deep-sea creatures that had somehow learned to fly between the stars. Zethko watched them with the patience of geological time. Soon, the dance would begin again. Energy would clash against matter, crystal against flesh, order against chaos. Ships would die, stars might be extinguished, and entire worlds could be consumed. And tomorrow, if any of them survived, they would do it all again. The war had become eternal, as constant and unchanging as the laws of physics themselves. Neither side could win because both sides were too perfectly matched. They had evolved together, adapting to each other's tactics, until their conflict had become a cosmic constant dot in the distance. Something small and insignificant appeared on the sensors. A single ship from one of the younger races, probably lost and confused. Zethko paid it no attention. After all, what could primitives possibly do that would matter in a war between gods? Captain Elena Vasquez had been having a perfectly ordinary day until the universe decided to remind her that ordinary was a luxury she couldn't afford. The U.S. Indomitable was 3 months into what should have been a routine mapping mission along the Outer Rim territories. Earth's colonial expansion had slowed in recent decades, not from lack of ambition, but from lack of suitable worlds. Most of the good real estate had already been claimed by older, more established species. Humans were still the new kids on the galactic block, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago. Elena didn't mind the slow assignment. At 43, she had seen enough action during the Rigel border conflicts to appreciate quiet exploration work. The Indomitable was a good ship with a solid crew, and mapping duty meant regular sleep cycles and hot meals. It was the kind of posting that let a career officer catch her breath. That changed when Lieutenant Torres called out from the communication station. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," he said, his voice tight with confusion. "It's like distress signals, but they're old. Really old. Some of them are using transmission protocols I don't even recognize." Elena moved to Torres's station, studying the displays over his shoulder. The signals were indeed ancient, layer upon layer of them, broadcasting on frequencies that spanned the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Some were clearly digital, Others seemed to be pure energy bursts with no obvious pattern. How old are we talking? She asked. Based on signal degradation and drift patterns. Some of these have been broadcasting for thousands of years, Captain. Maybe tens of thousands. Elena felt a familiar itch between her shoulder blades. The same feeling she'd gotten right. Before the surprise attack at Rigel Prime, something was wrong. Here, plot a course toward the signal source, she ordered. But keep us at yellow alert. Something that's been screaming for help that long probably has a good reason. The Indomitable changed course, her fusion engines pushing the ship toward the source of the ancient distress calls. As they drew closer, more signals began to register on their sensors. These weren't distress calls. They were tactical communications, weapons targeting data, and fleet coordination protocols. There was a battle happening out there. A big one. Range to signal source? Elena asked. Approximately 6 light hours, Captain, reported Navigator Chen from her station. But I'm reading some serious gravitational distortions ahead. Whatever's happening out there, it's affecting space-time itself. Elena had heard stories about such things. The galaxy was old, and some of the species that ruled it had technology that bordered on magic. Humans had encountered a few of these ancient races during their expansion, usually with results that ranged from embarrassing to terrifying. Most human captains tried very hard to avoid drawing their attention, but the distress signals bothered her. Someone was in trouble, and naval regulations were clear about responding to emergency beacons, regardless of who sent them. Continue approach, she ordered, but drop us to quarter impulse, and get me a full sensor sweep of everything ahead. What the sensors showed defied easy description. The battle was centered around a massive structure that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. The space station, if that's what it was, stretched across hundreds of kilometers in each direction. Its surface covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to bend light around itself, making it hard to focus on any specific detail. Around the station, 2 fleets were engaged in combat that made human naval battles look like children playing with toy boats. The first fleet was composed of ships that looked like living crystals. They were beautiful and terrible, each vessel apparently carved from a single massive gem that sparkled with internal fire. Beams of pure energy lanced out from these crystal ships, each one bright enough to outshine a small star. When the beams struck their targets, matter simply ceased to exist. The second fleet was even more disturbing. Their ships looked organic, like enormous sea creatures that had somehow learned to survive in vacuum. Their hulls rippled and shifted constantly, growing new weapons or armor as needed. When they fired, it wasn't with energy beams but with projectiles. That seemed to be made of living metal, things that moved like hunting animals and exploded into clouds of nanomachines that consumed everything they touched. Mother of God, whispered Torres. Captain, what are we looking at? Elena didn't answer immediately. She was trying to process the scale of what she was seeing. Each of those ships was larger than Earth's biggest space stations. The weapons they were using could sterilize entire planets. This wasn't just a battle. It was a clash between forces that could reshape star systems. Unknown vessel. A voice suddenly crackled over the communication system. The words came in perfect English, though there was something mechanical about the tone. You are approaching an active combat zone. State your identity and purpose. Elena looked at Torres, who shrugged helplessly. It's coming from both fleets, Captain. Somehow they're both talking to us at the same time. She activated the response channel, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Indomitable. We received distress signals and came to investigate. Do you require assistance? There was a pause. Elena could imagine representatives of both fleets trying to figure out what to do with this unexpected complication. "You are human," the voice said finally. It wasn't a question. "That's correct." Another pause. "Our databases indicate that humans are a recently emerged species with primitive technology. Your presence here is irrelevant. You should depart immediately for your own safety." Elena felt her jaw tighten. She'd been dismissed as primitive before, usually by species that had achieved faster than light travel, a few thousand years before humans managed the same feat. It never stopped being annoying. "With respect," she said carefully, "we picked up distress signals. Naval regulations require us to investigate and offer assistance. The signals you detected are combat communications, not distress calls," the mechanical voice replied. "This conflict does not concern your species. Withdraw to a safe distance and observe, if you must, but do not interfere." Elena looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at the tactical displays with expressions ranging from awe to terror. The weapons being fired out there could vaporize the indomitable without even noticing it. The smart thing to do was exactly what the voice suggested: back away and pretend this never happened. But something about the battle bothered her. She couldn't put her finger on it yet, but there was a pattern to the fighting that seemed familiar somehow. "All stop," she ordered. "Hold position at current range. Passive sensors only. Let's see what we can learn." "Captain," Chun said quietly, "are you sure this is wise? If we get caught in the crossfire—" "We won't," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. "Those ships have been fighting each other for— how long would you estimate, based on the debris field?" Torres ran quick calculations. "Based on the amount of wreckage and the degradation patterns. Years, Captain. Maybe decades." Elena nodded. "They've been at this for a long time. They're focused on each other, not on us. As long as we don't do anything stupid, we should be fine." She settled back in her command chair, watching the alien battle unfold. Crystal ships fired beams that could crack moons. Organic vessels responded with weapons that seemed to violate physics. Both sides moved with perfect precision, their tactics flawless and their coordination absolute. And slowly, Elena began to realize why the battle seemed familiar. She had seen this before. Not this exact fight, but this kind of fight. The kind where both sides were so evenly matched, so perfectly adapted to each other's tactics, that neither could gain a decisive advantage. It was a stalemate. A very expensive, very destructive stalemate that might continue forever. Elena had broken a few stalemates in her time. The question was whether she was crazy enough to try breaking this one. The answer, she was beginning to suspect, was yes. 3 weeks of watching gods fight had taught Elena Vasquez that even gods could get stuck in bad habits. The Indomitable maintained its position at the edge of the combat zone, sensors recording everything while the crew tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The battle between the crystal beings and the organic ships continued without pause. A deadly dance that played out across the void with mathematical precision. Lieutenant Commander Chun had taken to mapping the combat patterns during her off-duty hours. Elena found her in the observation lounge at 0300, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements, weapon trajectories, and timing charts. "Couldn't sleep either?" Elena asked, settling into the chair beside her tactical officer. Chun looked up from her work, rubbing tired eyes. "Captain, I think I'm going crazy. Either that, or we're watching the most predictable war in galactic history." Elena studied the displays Chun had created. Color-coded ship movements traced elegant curves through three-dimensional space, while timing charts showed weapon firing sequences with clockwork regularity. "Show me," Elena said. Chun activated the primary display, highlighting the crystal ships in blue and the organic vessels in red. "Watch this. Day 1 of our observation, 1400 hours ship time. The hologram showed the crystal fleet arranging itself in a perfect sphere around the central space station. Energy beams lanced out in coordinated patterns, while the organic ships formed a double helix formation, their bioweapons responding with equally precise timing. Now watch Day 7. Same time. The display shifted, showing another battle scene that looked nearly identical. Day 14. Another shift. Day 21. Elena frowned. The battles weren't just similar, they were virtually identical. Ship positions varied by mere kilometers. Weapon timing differed by seconds, but the overall pattern remained constant. It's like they're playing the same game over and over again, Chun continued. The crystal ships always deploy what I'm calling formation, Delta 7. The organic ships always counter with what looks like a double helix pattern. Neither side ever deviates from these tactics. Maybe those are just the most effective strategies available, Elena suggested. That's what I thought too, Chun said, calling up another display. But look at this. 3 days ago, one of the organic ships was damaged and fell out of formation. Instead of taking advantage of the gap, the crystal ships maintained their pattern and fired at empty space where the damaged ship should have been. Elena stared at the recording. Chun was right. The energy beam had indeed fired into empty space, missing an obvious opportunity to break the enemy formation. It gets weirder, Chun continued. Yesterday, a crystal ship developed what looked like a power fluctuation. Its energy output dropped by 30%. The organic ships compensated by reducing the power of their return fire by exactly the same amount. They what? They matched the power reduction. Like they were trying to keep the battle balanced instead of pressing their advantage. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Pull up everything we have on these two species. Background data, historical records, anything Earth intelligence has on them. Chun's fingers flew over her console. Here we go. The crystal beings call themselves the Kethmori, masters of energy manipulation, civilization dating back at least 2 million years. The organic ships belong to the Vashtai, biomechanical species, equally ancient. How long have they been fighting? According to Galactic Council records, 800,000 years, give or take. Elena sat back in a chair, pieces clicking together in her mind. 800,000 years of warfare between two perfectly matched opponents. Both sides so advanced that their technology bordered on omnipotence. And yet they were stuck repeating the same battle patterns with mechanical precision. They're not trying to win anymore, she said quietly. Ma'am? Think about it, Chun. 800,000 years of war. Both sides have had more than enough time to develop new tactics, new weapons, new strategies. But they haven't. They're locked into patterns that were probably established hundreds of millennia ago. Chun called up another display showing technological analysis. Our engineers have been studying their weapons. The crystal ships use directed energy systems that could theoretically be adapted for hundreds of different applications. The organic ships have biomechanical technology that should be capable of rapid evolution and adaptation. But they don't adapt, Elena finished. They've optimized warfare to the point where they can't think outside their own systems. It was like watching two chess grandmasters who had memorized every possible game. They could play with perfect technique, but neither could surprise the other because all possible moves had been calculated and countered long ago. Donalana stood up and began pacing, her mind racing. What do we know about human military doctrine that these two don't? Chun looked puzzled. Captain, our technology is thousands of years behind theirs. Our weapons couldn't even scratch their shields. I'm not talking about technology. I'm talking about thinking. What makes human tactics different? Chun considered this. Well, we're adaptable. Human commanders are trained to improvise when plans go wrong. We use deception, misdirection, psychological warfare, and We're unpredictable? Human battle doctrine emphasizes flexibility over optimization. We'd rather have 10 different plans that might work than one perfect plan that could fail. Elena stopped pacing. Exactly. These two races have become so advanced that they've forgotten how to be chaotic. They've optimized themselves into a strategic prison. She moved to the main display, zooming in on the space station that both fleets were fighting over. 3 weeks we've been watching, and neither side has gotten any closer to taking that station. They can't break the stalemate because they're both thinking the same way. So what do we do about it? Chun asked. Elena stared at the display for a long moment. Her career had been built on careful planning, following regulations, and avoiding unnecessary risks. What she was contemplating violated every principle of safe naval command. We break the pattern, she said finally. Captain? These two fleets have been dancing around each other for longer than human civilization has existed. They've forgotten that war isn't supposed to be a perfectly choreographed ballet. Sometimes you need to step on your partner's toes. Chum looked alarmed. Captain, you're not seriously considering interfering in their war. I'm considering ending it, Elena corrected. Or at least this battle. These two races are trapped in a loop they can't break on their own. They need someone to introduce chaos into their perfect system. With respect, Captain, we're one ship against two godlike civilizations. Even if we wanted to help, what could we possibly do? Elena smiled, and Chun suddenly realized why the captain had such a formidable reputation among her peers. When Elena Vasquez smiled like that, it usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. We're going to do something neither of those fleets can predict or counter, Elena said. We're going to be human. She activated the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. Report to battle stations. We're about to make history. As the alert klaxons began to sound, Elena looked out at the ancient battle raging beyond the viewports. Two perfect civilizations, locked in perfect combat, achieving perfect stalemate. She was about to introduce them to imperfection. And in Elena's experience, a little imperfection could accomplish what all the perfection in the universe couldn't. The question was whether the Indomitable would survive long enough to prove her theory. Elena Vasquez had done many crazy things in her naval career, but broadcasting a formal challenge to two godlike civilizations definitely topped the list. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Indomitable, she announced over all frequencies, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. I am officially requesting permission to mediate this conflict. The response was immediate and came from both fleets simultaneously, their mechanical voices overlapping in a harmony of disbelief. You seek to mediate? The Kethmori responded first. Human, this conflict spans longer than your species has existed. Your primitive understanding could not comprehend the complexities involved. The Vashtai concur, added the Organic Fleet's representative. This battle involves forces beyond your capability to influence. Withdraw before you are accidentally destroyed. Elena had expected this reaction. I understand your position, she replied calmly. But I noticed that you've been fighting over that station for 3 weeks since we arrived, and neither of you has gained any advantage. Perhaps a fresh perspective might help. There was a pause. Elena could imagine the ancient artificial intelligences running probability calculations, trying to determine what game this primitive creature thought she was playing. Very well, the Kethmori said eventually. You amuse us. We will give you 50 minutes to demonstrate your mediation. When you fail, you will depart and never return. The Vashtai agreed to these terms, the second voice added. 50 minutes to prove that your primitive species has anything meaningful to contribute. Elena felt sweat beading on her forehead. 50 minutes to end a war that had raged for 800,000 years. No pressure at all. Begin when ready, both voices said in unison. Elena looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at her with expressions ranging from terror to admiration. Lieutenant Commander Chun looked like she was reconsidering her career choices. "All right, people," Elena said. "Let's show them how humans fight. Torres, open all communication channels, every frequency we can transmit on. Chun, I want random firing patterns on all weapon systems. Navigation, prepare for evasive maneuvers that follow no logical sequence." "Captain," Chun said carefully, "what exactly is the plan here?" Elena moved her ship directly between the two massive fleets. The Indomitable looked like a minnow swimming between two whales, but she positioned it with the confidence of a dreadnought. "The plan is chaos," Elena announced. "For 800,000 years, these two have been fighting the perfect war. Perfect tactics, perfect formations, perfect predictions. We're going to introduce them to beautiful, glorious imperfection." She nodded to Torres. "Begin transmission." What followed was probably the most bizarre first contact in galactic history. Torres began broadcasting everything in Earth's cultural database simultaneously. Human music blared across tactical frequencies. Everything from classical symphonies to death metal to children's lullabies. Poetry readings interrupted fleet communications. Philosophical debates about the nature of reality drowned out tactical coordinates. Random snippets of human conversation, recorded from public spaces across Earth, created a cacophony of voices speaking dozens of languages about mundane daily concerns. Both alien fleets stopped moving. Their perfect formations wavered as communication systems were overwhelmed by the sheer chaotic noise of human civilization. "Now," Elena ordered, "The Indomitable's weapons opened fire, not at either fleet, but at random pieces of debris floating between them. Kinetic rounds struck ancient wreckage, sending fragments tumbling in unpredictable directions. Missiles detonated against empty space, creating explosion patterns that followed no military doctrine in any database. Elena was deliberately fighting wrong. Every shot was wasteful. Every maneuver violated basic tactical principles. And every decision seemed random because it was random. Chun, start using those dice you keep for your probability games, Elena called out. Roll for our next heading change. Captain, do it. Let chance decide where we go next. Chun pulled out a set of 20-sided dice, the kind used in ancient probability games. She rolled them across her console. Bearing 127 Mark 84, Captain. Take us there. Random speed. Keep rolling every 30 seconds. The Indomitable began moving in patterns that no computer could predict because they weren't based on logic, strategy, or tactical advantage. Elena was navigating by random chance, using a decision-making process that predated computer technology. Both alien fleets were now completely still, their weapons silent. Elena could imagine their artificial intelligences desperately trying to calculate her next move, based on millions of possible tactical scenarios, never realizing that there was no tactical purpose to calculate. 15 minutes gone, Torres reported. Elena nodded. Time for Phase 2. Begin collision course with random debris. I want us to accidentally bump into things, ma'am? Trust me. The Indomitable began what looked like the most incompetent flying in military history. Elena's crew deliberately piloted their ship into floating wreckage, using just enough force to send debris spinning off in new directions. Pieces of ancient ships began caroming around the battlefield, like billiard balls. The alien fleets tried to track the new debris trajectories, but the random collisions created cascade effects that were impossible to predict. Wreckage that should have followed simple ballistic paths instead bounced and ricocheted in ways that violated their targeting computers. 30 minutes, Torres called out. Both fleets suddenly came alive again. Elena realized they had given up trying to understand her tactics and decided to simply destroy the source of chaos. Energy beams and bioweapons began targeting the Indomitable from both directions. "This is it," Elena announced. "Chun, I need the most random evasive pattern you can roll. Don't think about it. Just roll the dice and call out whatever numbers come up." Chun's hand shook as she cast the dice again and again. "Port 15 degrees. Down 7. Spin 90 starboard. Accelerate to 3/4. The Indomitable twisted through space like a ship whose pilot had completely lost her mind. Elena's chaotic maneuvers took them through impossible gaps in the weapon's fire. Not because she was skilled enough to dodge godlike targeting systems, but because she was moving so randomly that the targeting systems couldn't predict where she would be. Ancient weapons that had never missed a target in millennia fired at empty space where the Indomitable should have been, but wasn't. 45 minutes. Torres shouted over the alarm klaxons. Both alien fleets were now firing continuously, their perfect formations broken as they tried to track one small ship that refused to follow any logical pattern. Energy beams from the crystal ships crossed the paths of bioweapons from the organic vessels. For the first time in 800,000 years, the two ancient enemies were getting in each other's way. "This is it," Elena said quietly. "Chun, one more roll. Make it count." Chun cast the dice with shaking hands. "Full stop and spin." Elena slammed the engines into reverse while activating every maneuvering thruster simultaneously. The Indomitable came to an almost complete stop and began rotating on all axes like a tumbling asteroid. Both fleets, unable to adjust their targeting solutions fast enough, fired their most powerful weapons at the same point in space. The energy beams and bioweapons that should have vaporized the human ship instead passed through the space where it had been a split second before and struck each other's flagships. The massive crystal command ship and the largest bio-dreadnought took direct hits from weapons designed to destroy planets. Both vessels erupted in explosions that outshone nearby stars, their destruction visible across the entire star system. In the sudden, shocking silence that followed, Elena keyed the communication system one more time. 50 minutes, she announced calmly. As agreed, this battle is now concluded. The remaining ships of both fleets hung motionless in space, their crews processing what had just happened. For 800,000 years, neither side had managed to destroy the other's flagship. A primitive human ship had just caused both fleets to destroy their own command vessels in less than an hour. Elena leaned back in her command chair, trying to look more composed than she felt. Her entire body was shaking from adrenaline, and she suspected that what she had just done was either the bravest or stupidest thing in military history, possibly both, but it had worked. The perfect war was over, ended not by superior technology or brilliant strategy, but by the simple power of chaos to break patterns that had become unbreakable. Sometimes, Elena reflected, the best way to solve an impossible problem was to ignore all the rules about how problems were supposed to be solved. It was, she thought, a very human approach. The silence that followed the destruction of both flagships was the deepest quiet the galaxy had heard in 800,000 years. Elena Vasquez sat in her command chair, watching the tactical displays as hundreds of ancient warships hung motionless in space. No weapons fired. No engines moved. Both fleets seemed frozen by the impossibility of what had just occurred. Finally, the communication system crackled to life. "Human vessel," said a Kethmori voice, but it sounded different now. Less mechanical, more uncertain. "We require clarification. How did you predict our targeting solutions?" "We didn't," Elena replied honestly. "We moved randomly." "That is impossible. Random movement in combat is inefficient. It provides no tactical advantage. Elena almost smiled. Exactly. There was a long pause before the Vashtai spoke. Their representative's voice also carried a note of confusion that hadn't been there before. Your weapons struck no targets. Your movements served no strategic purpose. By every measure, your performance was ineffective. And yet here we are, Elena pointed out. With both of your command ships destroyed and your fleets unable to continue the battle. Another pause, longer this time. Elena could imagine alien artificial intelligences working frantically to analyze what had happened, running calculations that kept producing results they couldn't accept. We do not understand, both voices said simultaneously. That's the point, Elena said gently. You've spent 800,000 years perfecting the art of war. You created the ultimate tactical systems, the perfect strategies, the most efficient formations. And in doing so, you trapped yourselves. She gestured toward the viewports where the ancient fleets remained frozen in their last battle positions. Both of you became so good at predicting each other that you stopped being able to surprise each other. Every move had been calculated, every response predetermined. You weren't fighting a war anymore. You were performing a dance that neither of you remembered how to stop. The silence stretched on for nearly 10 minutes before the Kethmori spoke again. We have reviewed our tactical databases, the crystalline being admitted. Our analysis confirms that we have been following identical strategic patterns for approximately 12,000 years. The Vashtai concur, the organic representative added. Our bioneural networks had optimized responses to such a degree that innovation became impossible. Elena felt a wave of sympathy for these ancient beings. They had achieved perfection and discovered that perfection was just another kind of prison. There's no shame in it, she said. It's natural for any system to optimize itself. But sometimes optimization becomes stagnation. Sometimes you need chaos to break free. Chaos, the Kethmori repeated, as if testing an alien concept. Disorder as a strategic tool. Unpredictability as a strength rather than a weakness, the Vashtai added. Exactly, Elena confirmed. My species hasn't been spacefaring long enough to optimize our warfare into perfection. We're still improvising, still making mistakes, still finding new ways to be surprised. She paused, looking at the debris field that surrounded them. The accumulated wreckage of countless battles fought over eons. Maybe that's what both of you need. Not more perfection, but permission to be imperfect again. The response took nearly an hour. Elena suspected that both fleets were having the first genuine discussions they'd shared in millennia. Their artificial intelligences trying to process concepts that their programming had dismissed as inferior. When they finally responded, both voices spoke together in perfect harmony. But this time, the harmony seemed intentional rather than automatic. Captain Vasquez, they said, we formally request that humanity mediate a permanent cessation of hostilities between our species. Elena blinked in surprise. She had hoped to stop one battle, not end an entire war. We'd be honored, but I'm not sure we're qualified for something that significant. You have demonstrated capabilities that neither of our species possess, the Kethmori explained. You think in ways that we have forgotten how to think. Your approach to problems is refreshing, the Vashtai added. We had not realized how thoroughly we had constrained our own possibilities. Elena looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at her with expressions of awe and terror. Lieutenant Commander Chun looked like she was considering whether to recommend Elena for a medal or a psychological evaluation. I'll need to contact Earth, Elena said finally. This is somewhat above my authority level. Of course, both aliens replied. We will maintain the ceasefire while you consult with your leadership. As the communications channels closed, Elena slumped back in her chair. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling drained and slightly disbelieving. Had she really just ended an 800,000-year war by flying badly and shooting randomly? "Captain," Chun said quietly, "what happens now?" Elena considered the question. Two ancient civilizations had just asked humanity to teach them how to be chaotic. Earth's colonial expansion had been limited by the fact that all the good territories were claimed by older, more advanced species. That situation had just changed dramatically. "Now," Elena said, "we write a report that no one at headquarters is going to believe." She stood up and walked to the viewports, looking out at the ancient fleets that were slowly beginning to move again. Both sides were pulling back from the space station they had fought over for so long, their ships moving in patterns that looked almost hesitant, as if they were testing the possibility of doing something different. "Torres, send a message to Earth," Elena ordered. "Inform them that we may have accidentally become the galaxy's newest diplomatic power." "What should I tell them happened here, Captain?" Elena thought about how to summarize the last hour in a way that wouldn't get her court-martialed for insanity. "Tell them that we discovered two species who had forgotten how to be surprised," she said finally. "And we reminded them that sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem is to stop trying to solve it perfectly." She paused, watching the alien ships as they continued their slow withdrawal. For the first time in 800,000 years, neither fleet knew exactly what would happen next. And somehow, that seemed to be making them both happy. "Also," Elena added with a slight smile, "tell them we're going to need a bigger diplomatic corps. I have a feeling we're about to become very popular with species who want to learn how to think like humans." Chun raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do humans think, Captain?" Elena laughed, the sound carrying a note of exhausted triumph. "Badly," she said. "We think badly, randomly, and inefficiently. And apparently, that's exactly what the galaxy needs." Outside the viewports, the ancient war finally came to an end, not with a grand treaty or a climactic final battle, but with two perfect civilizations learning that imperfection might be the most perfect thing of all. Elena Vasquez, career naval officer and accidental galactic diplomat, settled back into her command chair and began composing the strangest after-action report in human history. Some days, she reflected, it really paid to be primitive.